What's going on, guys? Welcome to this edition of the Unbreakable Man podcast. In today's episode, we are going to go over something that's going to be incredibly insightful to guide you through the context of life so that you can show up as the man you want to be, you can get the results you want, and ultimately live in alignment with your true self. This is a practice that I needed in my earlier days when I was really struggling in my mindset and just kind of everywhere in life. I just didn't really know what my guide rails were. And so today we're going to go through a practice that you can use to help facilitate those guide rails. And when you have those guide rails, then you're going to know exactly what is the most important thing for you as an individual. This is something that I've touched on before, but we're going to get into a really nice practice so that you can walk away with some really clear insights into exactly what you need to be guided in life so that you can, again, get the results you're looking for. So before we dive into today's episode, I really want to say thank you to the listeners, everybody out there that's been supporting us along the way. This has been incredible. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit the like, the big thumbs up, and the subscribe button. That helps everybody involved, helps more people get involved in this community, more people involved in what we're doing so that we can have more men showing up as their authentic self and really be the man they want to be. And so if you are a supporter of the show, be sure to hit the thumbs up, mash that like button. And as always, if you are on iTunes, be sure to hit subscribe as well there. So I really appreciate you guys. It's been incredible, an incredible run. On this episode, I am going to go through some really cool stuff. I really want to share some, I guess, personal insights before we get into it. I think it's always really important that you understand who I am, what I'm doing, kind of the whole in and out, right? So we went through a whole saga of, we had black mold in our house. If you haven't been listening to the podcast before, we had black mold in our house and we got, I wouldn't say we got kicked out, but we kicked ourselves out because my wife was getting sick and the whole nine. We are finally come full circle. The house is finally done. We are back in. It's been an incredible ride. And all along the way, I'm so glad that I have the mindset practices and the mind body practices that I have, because it really gave me the opportunity to stay grounded, to know who I am, to just stay in my lane, as I like to say, so that as I was going through this whole process of essentially being homeless, kind of being topsy-turvy, that's a word. I'm just making up words, topsy-turvy, that I was grounded the entire time. And I really, really banked on my practices, my fundamentals. I just went back to what I call my daily dial, those practices that really supported me all along the way. And it's been, it's been amazing. I'm really happy that we've come full circle. So hats off to our contractors. There's always discrepancies. There's always conversations that you have to have with your contractors. If you've ever gone through a renovation or even a build, you got to be incredibly clear. And so that was like a whole process and understanding communication back and forth and making sure that we were getting what we wanted. So that was a whole thing, but it's been an amazing ride. Such an adventure thinking about that whole thing, man. It's been very life-changing in a way that I'm really happy that I had the fundamentals. And that, I think, if there's one big takeaway, it was absolutely that. There was definitely times where incredibly stressed, incredibly, kind of feeling like, man, there's a lot here. But ultimately, if you're going through a transition in life, just go back to your fundamentals, your practices, your mind-body practices. And maybe I'll do a whole video on that in another one, or a whole YouTube video for you guys, so that you have the absolute practices that, just really knock out of the park. And in fact, now that I think about it, I actually did talk about that in episode 50 when we talk about just some daily fundamentals, some routines to stay grounded. So those are definitely practices that I would absolutely utilize. I would definitely go back to episode number 50 if you're interested in that stuff. So all is well. So let's dive into today's episode. And as a quick reminder, if you are watching this before our next Unbreakable Man experience, be sure to jump on. We got a couple more spots, although by the time this comes out, you're probably going to miss, but we are going to have another one in November. So if you have been thinking about the Unbreakable Man experience, if you are going through any transition in life, if you are just not getting the results you want and you really want to break through, this is a life-changing experience. I can't guarantee anything in life because ultimately it's your experience, but we're batting 1,000, right? Every guy that has come through that It's ultimately said it's life-changing, and we put our heart and soul into that program. It's been absolutely incredible to see the transformations on these guys and to just to see them really take off in life. And it's been amazing. And so that is still available for the end of this year. We got one left coming up in the year. We got one as of today, the filming. We got one in a couple weeks. We do have like maybe 1-2 more spots for that one, but not sure if you're gonna see this before that. So make sure to register early before they fill up. So other than that, let's dive in to today's episode. Let's go. What is up, beautiful humans? This is Dr. Dave Cahotis. I am on a mission to forge strong, heart-centered, and purpose-driven men. And this podcast is here to help you stop managing your problems and start breaking free of stress, limiting beliefs, and excuses that stop you from executing at your fullest potential, living with passion, and being the man you want to be. So let's go. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is creating a set of guide rails for you so that you are guided in your life, ultimately, that is in a way that you always know you're going in the direction of what is your highest, I want to say your highest purpose, but your highest value. And so we are going to create a set of values for you that will guide you along the path. And when I say along the path, it means just like along the path of life. And what I want you to do, and so if you are watching this using YouTube or you're listening to this and on a podcast, just grab a journal or write it in your phone, because this is going to be an incredibly insightful episode. You're going to really walk away with a ton of value because you're going to know what's going to be incredibly important to you. And you're always going to know with knowing what's most important to you, what you can do about it so that you can show up as that individual. And why this is really, really important is that in today's day and age, there is this vying for your attention. And, and I see it in the political scheme, right? It's like, if you're not on this side of the spectrum or this side of the aisle, well, you think this, this, and this, right? Or if you're on this side of the aisle, then you're supposed to think this, that, it's like there's like these set of values, but ultimately we're all trying to go after the same thing. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel secure. We all want to feel wanted and loved. And like we all want to feel that we have an impact and purpose and all of these things. And, I'm going to use politics just as an example, just because it's so divisive, and they do that on purpose. And there's like this like kind of this, breaking apart of the consciousness of humanity. And they're trying to like create this separation within us. But ultimately, we all want the same thing. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel loved. We all want to know that we are adequate and good enough and all of these things. And so if you don't have a set of values for yourself, you're just not going to be an autonomous human. You're going to sort of succumb to the whims of what other people are saying, and you're going to kind of believe them. And I'm not saying that's always a bad thing, because, it is a good thing to like kind of go in a path and just like listen to somebody else. But ultimately, the whole point of being an unbreakable man is that you are autonomous, that you are a sovereign human that has gone through the inner work of discovering who you truly are and saying, oh yeah, like, well, that person believes this, and like they can believe that, and that's okay. That's for them. But I know what I believe, and I'm solid in that, and just having that solidity in yourself. And so what I did early on was I created a set of guide rails for myself, a set of values. And what I want you to do is actually on a piece of paper, or in your journal, just break them into a couple sections, just like main sections of your life. And really, the three main sections that I always guide people along is the three main pillars, which is like your personal relationships, your personal self, right? So like your connection to yourself, and in your profession, right? So like those kind of three main areas. Of course, there's a lot more areas of life. There's, finances, and, there's health, and although that kind of lands in your personal side, but ultimately, I really want you to focus on those three main areas. Why that's important is it just helps create context for where you need to go and where kind of how do you need to think. Now, what I want you to think about is on a day-to-day basis, right? Like on a day-to-day basis, and kind of thinking about the last week and maybe even the last month, and in those three main areas. Let's just focus on one just for ease so that we don't get overwhelmed by all this. And so like the mind can get a little, ahead of ourselves. I just really want you to focus on one thing. And that one thing is just your personal self. And I want you to think about, in what areas of your life do you get really irritated with yourself, right? Like really irritated with yourself. And I know that sounds like kind of backwards to think about, but this is really important, right? Like, because if you're getting irritated with yourself about anything, it means you're not living in integrity with something that's really important to you. I'm going to say that again. If you get irritated with yourself, now we're going to talk about other people. Don't worry about politics and don't worry about, Karen from the office or wherever, like just focus on yourself. What areas of your life are you getting really upset with yourself? Maybe it's being disciplined. Maybe it's being consistent. Maybe it's not showing up, with empathy in an area, right? Like whatever that thing is, like what do you get upset about with yourself? Don't worry about anything else right now. We're just going to focus on you. And why this is really important, again, is if you are getting upset with you are telling yourself you're not living in integrity, living in alignment with the part of you that is really calling you forward. That's something that's very important to you. Now, why this is important is that this is a value. You value something without even realizing it. And I want you to think about this for a second. Even if you have to hit pause and do that, like just sit and meditate on this. Like, okay, well, I get really upset when I don't work out consistently. And it's like, well, why am I getting really upset with not working out consistently? Now, it could be consistency or it could be self-love, right? Maybe that's the thing that's really important to you. Compassion for yourself. Maybe you beat yourself up about it. And so it's not even just the consistency aspect, but maybe it's the feeling that you're not loving yourself. And that is in turn really, it's almost like a double irritation. You're not loving yourself, you're not showing up for yourself. And so you get really upset and you're like, you get really pissed. But this is really important because anytime you get upset, it's not the upsetness that is super important, but we need to recognize it as it is. There is no good or bad in life. And I've said this before and I'll keep saying it. There is no good or bad. What is the most important thing is that there is an awareness and an opportunity to learn. Everything in life is simply an opportunity to experience something new. So in the what we consider bad, quote unquote bad, right, where you get very irritated with procrastination or lack of consistency, has nothing to do with procrastination or lack of consistency. It has everything to do with a value set that you're not living up to. There is some type of value, something that's very important for you. That's so important, in fact, that if you're not living up to this, you get upset, and then you get upset that you're upset, and then the cycle continues. And oftentimes, I won't go into the mechanism, but oftentimes we'll then feel the pain of that. And then we'll sabotage ourselves even more. And so then you'll, as an example, I've seen this in a lot of men. They'll drink, they'll go do drugs, they'll go watch porn, they'll do something that is out of alignment with what their true self really wants for them. And so if you get into those ruts, feeling stuck, it's because you're not living in integrity with a true sense of self, right? Like that true sense of self might be self-love. So let's use that as our example. Now let's hold, let me think about that. I'm going to hit pause on that. We're going to come back to like the action steps here in a second. But what I want you to think about now is in your personal relationships. So we're going to switch gears, and I want you to think about your personal relationships now. What one thing in the last week, in the last month, really pissed you off in your personal relationship, right? Maybe it's your wife and she keeps coming down on you for not cleaning the garage, right? As an example, I say that with laughter because I had it. Hey, are you going to clean the garage today? It's like I know, right? It's like, it gets really irritating. Like women will do that thing where they have this unique ability to just like hold us accountable by not even saying it directly, but they'll just be like, hey, are you going to do that thing that you said you're going to do? And actually, I want to really emphasize this. This is actually really important because if you are not living in integrity with your knowing, right? In integrity with yourself, your wife will feel that. And she'll feel a lack of trust in you. She'll feel that lack of integrity and she won't trust you. And so she won't soften and open herself up to you. And when I say open herself up to, I don't just mean sexually or physically. I mean energetically. I mean in her heart. She will feel that shit. And she will know that like, yeah, you're not doing it. Like you're not living up to integrity. And so what I want you to think about is what area of life or in your personal relationship really irritates you, right? Like what when it comes forward. And so now what I want you to think about is, okay, well, what's really important here? So let's use that as an example. So if it really pisses you off that your wife calls you out or simply asks you the question, and I can raise my hand, right? I can raise my hand and say, yes, that happened to me. What it did was that it informed me that integrity was incredibly important. And I get really irritated when I see hypocrisy. And like when I see hypocrisy in others, I get really irritated. This is why like I get very irritated with politics and I can't even do it because I see so much hypocrisy in what people are saying on the podium and then what they're actually doing in life. It's like, dude, like we know you took the money. Like it's very clear, right? Like you're saying one thing and all of a sudden you lost like $10 billion. Like what is happening? Like I can see it. Like it's very clear. So hypocrisy for me is like, man, like what that's saying is that you're not living in integrity with what you truly are wanting, right? And so for me, my value with relation to that was integrity. And so when I recognize that, I'm like, oh, well, what does that mean? Like, how do I now live in integrity? So this is what's really cool. Once you have identified a few of those irritations, you now know instantly what is very important to you. Because if there's an irritation, it means that there's something that's very important to you. So as an I'll give you another example just for clarity. So one of the things that would really piss me off is when people would cut me off, like trying to like get into an on-ramp or just like, just like, zoom around me while I'm driving and like then they just like kind of, kind of cut in. And now I think about it, like I do that a lot to people sometimes. So I got to check myself at the door. And so why that's really important is like cooperation, like supporting one another is really important. And if you're not cooperating with one another, like we can't get along, like we cannot support one another. And so like compassion and compromise and supporting one another is really important to me. So that was a really high value. I knew that was a thing and I knew I needed to focus on that. And so let's go back. And so that's just for clarity's sake. So let's go back to those couple examples that I used. Now, of course, you at home are going to do this work for yourself, meaning like go through those major areas of your life and really get an idea of where you're not feeling in alignment or where you feel that there is some type of misalignment, aka where are you pissed off? Where are you triggered? What triggers you about that? And then really ask yourself like, well, what really pisses me off here? And then once you do that, what I want you to do is then turn that into a positive. What am I actually valuing? There was a value miss. And that's really what it is. It's simply a value miss. Once you identify that, you're like, oh yeah, I want to experience love, self-love. Okay, that's what I'm doing. So now this is what I want you to think about. So you have that value. Let's say that is what, when you're being consistent, that's what's, really what you're looking for in your consistent workouts. I want you to think about self-love as a thing. Now, self-love is a very intangible, very subjective experience, and yet there is still an objective outcome that must be true for you to experience self-love. So this is what I want you to think about. This is like question number 2. What must objectively be true for you to experience self-love? Now, here's the thing. Like, of course, you can sit on a rock and meditate and experience self-love, and I've done it. I've definitely done it. The inner world is very much subjective, and you absolutely can create your own reality based on the way you're feeling. However, we as humans live in a third dimensional reality. We live in an objective reality. So, what must objectively be true for you to experience that essence of self-love? And maybe it's just like writing out 3 things that you want to do per day and you just check off the box. Maybe it's setting a goal and slowly progressing towards it. It means that you are giving yourself the knowing that you're like, hey, I'm worth it. I'm worth it to go after my dreams. Maybe it's, dude, like and this is for me, like I love myself so much that I'm willing to sacrifice my old world of like belief systems to really go after a high level of purpose for myself and then create a reality for me that was so amazing that like it was almost like I couldn't even have dreamed of anything better. That is what for me was really important. That's why I wanted to share this, is because if you don't have the knowing of what your value is, you can't go after it. You're just going to live out of integrity, not in integrity, rather. You're going to live not in integrity. And then you're going to constantly be like kind of like an underlying irritation. You're going to be like, I call it a grumble puss. You're going to be like constantly looking for that thing that you actually want. But in reality, you never know what it is. And so you're constantly unsatisfied. And so how to live from a satisfied position is to know what, number one, pisses you off, that then informs you of your true essence of value, what is important to you. And now you can ask the question, well, what must be true in order for me to experience self-love? And so that's what I would ask you. It's like, well, what must be true for you in order to experience your sense of value, whatever your value is? Again, we're not having a live conversation, so it's hard for me to know what your experience is. But for me, let's say self-love, it is, call it checking things off the box. It's not just working out, it's something else too. It's like, it's kind of doing all the things. It's really having a clear conscious of knowing like, this is what I want. This is the action steps that get me there. And I'm moving in that direction. That for me, discipline is the highest form of self-love. That clear as day. So discipline is very much also a part of that as well. When it comes to integrity, as the second example, that for me was like, well, what does that mean to live in integrity? What must be true for me to live in integrity? For me, that meant that I have to know what I want, and I have to know how to achieve it. And I have to live in integrity, not just from an objective perspective, but also from a subjective perspective. That means I have to entrain my mind and body to be in the frequency, to be in alignment with the highest vibration that I can possibly live, meaning I'm living from a state of self-love. I'm living from a state of joy. I'm living from a state of bliss, and really bringing that forward. And if I'm not living from that, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be accepting and compassionate about those areas of my life. And I'm just going to allow for that experience to just dissipate. And just like water, right? It flows in and out as emotions are. And I'm going to be able to live in integrity with my highest value. For me, that is love. For me, that is joy. And so if I'm living in integrity with that, it's not just from a doing perspective, it's also from how am I showing up, right? Like, how am I showing up to my relationship with my kids? Am I just showing up and be like, hey, blah, 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 blah. And sometimes I do every once in a while, like when I'm hungry and tired, and it's like you kind of become unconscious for a minute, but it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person for being irritated when I'm tired and hungry when I come home. What it means is that if I'm going to live in integrity with who I truly want to be, that means that I show up with joy, with love. And so as an example, what I'll do oftentimes is when I come home, I'll go sit and I'll meditate. I'll breathe. I'll just reconnect with myself, and then I'll show up, because that's a really important value for me. But I had to go through the ups and downs of life in order to know what my value was, in order to know how to create the actions for me to show up as the highest version of self, meaning I live in integrity with that. I am embodied in that. And sometimes when everybody's irritated, I will turn off the TV and I'll turn on dance music, and I'm like, random dance party, let's go. Because dance has been shown to be like the highest and number one way to get out of a funk. And when we do random dance party at home, it's amazing. Like, we love it. It's honestly one of my favorite things in the world. So these are really important things, because if I didn't know what was of high value for me, I would have never been able to go after and create the actions that were in true alignment of that. And again, if like you're going through life and you're a little bit irritated and you're just like, you kind of feel stuck, and like, of course, there's this essence of purpose and all these things that we really want in life. But in reality, it's like, we really just want to live in alignment with who we truly are. We really just want to live in alignment with like, yeah, I just want to experience self-love. I just want to experience the joys of life. And that's literally it. So all you have to do is, when you're pissed, not get pissed that you're pissed, right? Because that happens, but to like see it, to use it, right? Like to use that as information, because it's just information. It's like, well, what am I pissed about? Just take a step back and just ask yourself, well, what am I actually pissed about right now? Because that will inform you of your values. And then in your values will inform you of the actions necessary in order for you to live in alignment with that. And that's why I call these guide rails, because that's really what they are. These values and the things that are important to you, these value sets, are guide rails to support you. So no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, as I described early on in this podcast, that when you are living in alignment with that, you will absolutely experience all that you want, even if things are up and down. Like, as I mentioned, like when we were, 18 months, like living out of Airbnbs and living out of short-term rentals, because we were like, are we going to be back in the house or are we not going to be back in the house? And it was like completely chaotic for a while. And yet all the while, like I knew my values and I knew the actions necessary for me to live in alignment with that. And a lot of times when we're unconscious, when we're not living from that conscious state, that's what's going to happen. We're going to just kind of like living, just like this quiet, it's like worse than quiet desperation, but in a way, like we're living in this quiet desperation. We're living in this like kind of grumble puss like mentality. And nobody likes that. Nobody wants to be around that energy. Your wife won't find that attractive. It's not like she wants to go have sex with you when you're like pissed off all the time. So you got to know what pisses you off and you got to turn that and you got to alchemize that. And so this is one of those practices that I highly recommend. Not only do I highly recommend it, it's almost like necessary if you want to be a conscious human and for you to lead your family and lead your life and be the best version of yourself. And so this is what I would recommend. So use this, walk forward with it. I know you're going to get a ton out of it. If you find this valuable, then please share. Get in the comments section. If you're watching this on YouTube, get in the comments section and just share. What are your highest values? What did you come up with? What are those actions that are really important for you to live in alignment with that? And that's going to help so many people. And so I know you're going to get a ton out of this. And if you found this valuable, please share this episode with a man who will get. And by the way, like, of course, all of these things are not just necessary or like related just to men. But if you know a man that can get a lot of value out of this, please share this, because that's how this episode and this podcast is going to get more insights and views so that we can help more people, because that's ultimately what the purpose of this is. So I really appreciate you guys. As always, hit the like and subscribe button on every channel you got on YouTube, Spotify, on iTunes, on the podcast. Please share this episode. If you are looking to break through any of those areas and you just need some support, come to our next Unbreakable Man experience. And man, I will say this, like, the Unbreakable Man experience is life-changing. I keep saying it. I know it. I've seen it. It's amazing. So go to theunbreakableman.com. You can hit apply there, and I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys there. All right. If you're really committed, let's go. All right, guys. I appreciate you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Unbreakable Man podcast. And as always, stay unbreakable.